Well, the big news is this. Gary Lineker is going to step back from presenting Match of the Day. We're bringing you as much as we know about this. I'm delighted to say I'm joined in the studio live by my colleague Mike Graham. So great to have you here.
Good afternoon. How nice to be back.
Very nice to have you here. Now, are you surprised by this? Because yesterday I think we thought that the BBC were going to, or depending on your perspective, roll over and kind of bow and defer to the great Gary Lineker, who was going to be allowed to do absolutely whatever he wanted to do, and no head would roll and there would be no stepping back from anything. And he himself tweeted, yep, looking forward to presenting Match of the Day. And I think lots of people thought, good, looking forward to watching you presenting it.
Well, isn't it interesting? Yes. I mean, I guess the pressure just got too much, because you've got to remember, Gary Lineker thinks that he is able to do whatever the heck he likes, but he can't do whatever the heck he likes, because he is the face of the BBC. I mean, you've worked there.
Yes.
If somebody went up to someone in the street and said, who's the face of the BBC, they'd probably say David Attenborough or Gary Lineker.
Well, also, he's the highest paid presenter.
He's also the highest paid presenter that everybody knows. He makes no, and he's been sort of poking the bear lately. He's been pushing his luck, and he's been trying to sort of see how far he can go.
Yes.
And suddenly the government's involved. Suddenly, when the Home Secretary is saying that it's a bad idea to start talking about, you know, Nazi Germany in the same breath as the current Conservative government. Yes. Knowing what we know about the government and the BBC currently, you know, a lot of people at the BBC, I'm told, were not very happy with Gary Lineker because he was making them look bad. He was putting them in the spotlight. But he continued with this arrogance, as you say, tweeting only yesterday, looking forward to seeing you all on Saturday. I think the vast amount of pressure and the fact that effectively he's taken on the government in a very, very public way and in a very bad taste way, I have to say. I think the BBC had no choice but to at least, I suggested this actually right at the beginning, to suspend him for the rest of the season, bring him back next season, and let's see how we go. Because I don't think he has the right to do something that nobody else at the BBC is allowed to do.
Well, there was a great deal of sort of finagling, it seemed to me. After all, I worked for the BBC for, I think it's 33 years, woman and child.
Right.
And I know exactly what my contract said every time.
Yes.
And they said there were all sorts of clauses and paragraphs about political affiliations, even to the point of delineating charitable affiliations.
Right.
You weren't really supposed to back a particular charity, even if it was a great cause.
Yes.
You know, you weren't supposed to obviously endorse any products of any kind, and you weren't supposed to have any political, particular subjective views that might, and this was, I think, the phrase that was in every contract, and I can't believe his was any different from mine. Obviously, he was paid a great deal more than me, but I think the contract wording was probably very similar, and it was anything that would bring the BBC into disrepute. Well, this most definitely has. However, we've had people all week saying, but there's a huge gulf and a chasm between those people who work in news and current affairs, who are not allowed to espouse political opinions publicly, and those who work in the football department, sports, you know, gardening, hairdressing, you know, they're allowed to say whatever they like.
Exactly. But you see, I disagree with that sort of summation of it, because I heard you yesterday, and I actually put out a tweet about how brilliant your defence of the situation was to why he should have been careful, because this is a particularly horrible thing to say. You know, I know there are some Jewish groups who have backed him, but an awful lot of Jewish groups haven't.
Most haven't.
Most of them have said, because nobody in their right mind, and I'm afraid it does show the rather infantile level of Gary Lineker's brain. You know, he discovered politics about 7 years ago, and suddenly now he thinks that he can give us all, you know, lectures on what the government's doing. But to in any way, shape or form compare any democratic, modern, electable government as something that was so dark, that was the most heinous thing that happened in the history of the world ever, and hopefully will never ever happen again. It's not on, it's not a joke.
This government is not intent on genocide. This government is trying to stop people drowning, not make people drowning. This government isn't operating on the base of race at all. That's not the pivoting force of any of this. It is the most grotesque analogy. It really is.
It really is.
Deeply offensive. And not only that, deeply ignorant, enormously inaccurate, totally unhelpful, doesn't illustrate anything. It's a really invidious and completely, you know, abysmally bad comparison. I'll give you the comment from the BBC on Twitter that we've just received. This is it. We have never said that Gary should be an opinion-free zone, or that he can't have a view on issues that matter to him, but we have said that he should keep well away from taking sides on party political issues or political controversies.
Yes, and I think that's very sensible, because if Gary Lineker wants to give an opinion on whether he likes bananas or whether he is more interested in giraffes than bears, or whether in fact, you know, he loves Barcelona better than Real Madrid, that's all fine. But, you know, because he clearly has no filter, because he has no understanding of politics, and he just thinks he wants to be part of this anti-Tory, you know, they're all evil, horrible psychopaths, they're all maniacs, because that's his echo chamber. You know, he can't just go around saying stuff like that. And similarly, people say, oh, but he's a sports presenter. Well, he's not anymore, because he went to Qatar and he made a documentary literally about human rights rights abuses in Qatar. So for me, he's crossed that line. So now he has to be treated like everybody else.
I also think one of the issues is if you're presenting sports or you're presenting gardening, you're presenting a food programme, and your political opinions have been so kind of vehemently expressed that A, you've offended a great many people, but B, they're kind of obtruding over whatever it is you're saying. You know, nobody can actually focus on the football or the gardening or the cookery or whatever it is you're meant to be doing, because your political persuasions and opinions have been so sort of trenchantly and clumsily expressed that everybody's talking about it. Plus, you've become the news story. And also, your front page of the paper.
We all work in the same sort of way. You know, you walk into a building, when you're in that building, you respect the people who run the building. You know, you don't suddenly think, oh, I can just say anything I want because I'm such a big name and I've got 8 million Twitter followers, I can do what I like. Well, guess what, Gary? You can't do what you like. And I'd like to just send a message to all of these idiots who have been defending him and saying, oh, well, he didn't actually say Nazis. This is how it all starts. Get lost. You've lost the battle. He's gone. He might come back, but he'll be a very different man.
Let's have a word with Tessa Dunlop. Now, Tessa's a former BBC presenter. I've certainly had the pleasure of working with her at the BBC myself. So, Tessa, I'm very interested indeed to see what you've got to say about this. Good afternoon to you.
I think I'd probably fall into one of the camp that Michael's just assigned to idiots, because I have a degree of sympathy for Gary Lineker. I don't, in fact, associate the BBC with him. In many ways, he's not bigger than the BBC, but in terms of his sports brand, he certainly has a unique appeal out with the state broadcaster. And I've always very much thought of him as somebody who I may take opinion on regarding football, but otherwise I consider the rest of his sort of opining a hobby. That you may or may not agree with. And I can see that the BBC's got itself into a bit of a bind here, but I would not just caution Gary, but also caution the BBC. The likes of you leaving, Vanessa, have been a loss for the brand, and partly because of their pay transparency, increasing numbers of big beasts are leaving the BBC. And I would suggest that Gary is someone they should really try and hold on to.
But do you think regardless of his behaviour, because that gives him ultimate power, that gives him a total kind of autocracy or some despotic rule over the BBC, which can't be seen to be condoned, can it?
Well, no, but as has been frequently commented upon, he is a sports presenter. And regarding the very clumsy analogy between the immigration bill that's currently being floored in Parliament and the behaviour and his commentary on the Second World War, this has often been done before. The likes of Boris Johnson are always raking in analogies with the Second World War, for better or for worse. So I would suggest that all of us need to detox and generally, and I say this as a historian, stay away from using analogies with the Second World War. Just take a breath and think twice. So Gary needs to learn from this, but the BBC also needs to consider hard about where that impartial line lies for the likes of Gary Lineker, because he's a footballer, for goodness sake. Do we really take him seriously? The great sadness of this is, from my point of view, that it's moved the heat away from government and really their substandard, probably illegal bill.
Thank you very much, Tessa. I mean, I would say that we do take him seriously when he's paid £1.35 million worth of licence fee payers' money. That's your money, yours and mine.